Hi everyone! So today we're just going to cover making an advent calendar. This week that's basically all I'm working on. So I thought I would do a little how-to video on making a quilted advent calendar. Now what I have is going to be a very large one. It's going to be hung on the wall and it's I believe about 4 by 3. It's a pretty big one. But there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to just shrink it. I am going to attach a link to basically my pattern for it. I'm creating this from scratch. I tried to find some that I like, but I couldn't find any that didn't want to also sell me the fabric for it. So here I am. So that's what we're gonna do today, and we'll just go straight into it, okay?
So your first step is going to be cutting all of your pieces. I'm just going to skip ahead to when I finish cutting all of them though, so that I can show you all the pieces you're going to need. Here are almost all the pieces you're going to need. You have over here your title panel. This is going to be a big strip at the top of it, just to look pretty. It can also be where you add like Merry Christmas or something in vinyl. Then we have your pocket fronts. These are going to be 6.5 by 6.5. You're going to need 23 of these. You can use random fabrics. You can use only a couple. That's fine. And then you're going to have your pocket front that's 6.5 by 15.5. These are for the 24th and the 25th. Then over here we have your pocket background. This is going to be a little piece that's showing at the top of your pocket. So you're going to want it to be something you like. You're going to need 23 of these, just as many as you have your pocket fronts. And then you're going to have another pocket lining, 6.5 by 6.5 as well. This is going to be inside your pocket. You won't see this. You can use scrap fabric or nicer fabric. It doesn't really matter. And then you're going to have a 6.5 by 15.5 pocket lining and pocket background, and you'll have 2 of each of those as well. Then you're going to have your backing, which is going to be 34 by 44. This is for going on the back and will be your binding as well. I used the same material here for my rod pocket, which was going to be 42.5 by 4 inch. You can use different material if you'd like it for that. Your first step for sewing is be taking one of your pocket fronts and one of your pocket linings and putting the 2 right sides together so that you have your pretty sides inside. And then you're going to sew 1/4 inch along the top. This is going to form your nice seam so that you don't have any fraying edges for your pocket lining. Now here what you're going to see me do is I'm going to do something called a chain stitch, which just simply means that I'm going to stop here at the end and then take another that I'm sewing together and go straight into sewing that one. This just saves some thread so you don't have to stop and cut and stop and cut over and over again. After you finish sewing all of your pocket fronts to your pocket linings, you're going to iron all of them flat. This will just help keep the seam nice and smooth and not have any budging or folding while you sew the rest of it. You're going to want to make it so that the pocket front is just a little bit past your pocket lining so you don't see the pocket lining. It's not the end of the world if you have a hard time doing that. You just really need to get it to be flat, and that's really it. The next step is to be sewing a little finishing edge on all of the pocket fronts. This is just going to really help them stay put in place while you do all of the rest of the steps. It also just helps to make it look clean and finished. This is going to be just a little bit less than 1/4 inch so that you get that seam in this stitch. This easiest way to do that is just to line it up with the presser foot and then move your needle as needed. And then you're just going to do that on all of these as well. Now that we've gotten all of that done, we're going to sew your pocket fronts to your pocket backgrounds. To do this, you're actually going to want to measure about 1.5 inches down from your pocket background to place the top of your pocket. And then you're just going to pin it there and you're going to do that around the other. See, that part is where it's going to start, and that's the little piece that I was saying is going to be showing. And once you've got that pinned in place at the top, you're going to take the bottom of the pocket and you're going to line it up to the bottom of your pocket background. This is going to make it so that you have a deep base pocket so that you can fit more things in there. Once you've pinned that, you're going to have this sort of extra material there. What we're going to end up doing with that is sort of creating a fold. Now to do this, you're going to want to measure about 1/4 of an inch, a little bit over 1/4 of an inch down from the bottom. You can eye this, you can measure it, doesn't really matter, but you're going to want to make sure that there's at least 1/4 of an inch space there before you have the end of your fold. And you're going to get that lined up. Sometimes it takes a little try and error, it's a little bit finicky here, but you're going to get that, and then you're going to fold it down so that you have your fabric inside and you have a straight edge. Essentially what it's going to just make it is so that that pocket ends up being smaller than your 6.5. And then once you get one side, the other side comes pretty easily. It just kind of naturally wants to go where it wants. And then you're going to have this nice deep pocket, and we're just going to sew all the way around, and I'll show you that in just a second. I'll have one done here for you so you can see here. That's how you're going to get this nice deep pocket. Once we have all those pins, we're going to start sewing around the edges. Now for this, you're actually going to want to sew slightly shy of 1/4 of an inch, so that you go down from the very top. Don't worry about not having extra fabric, and then you're going to sew down all the way nice and flat over that fold, making sure that it's where it needs to be. And once you get right up to that edge, you're going to stitch just close enough that you're about shy of 1/4 of an inch, and then you lift your pretzel foot with the needle in the fabric and kind of turn it. This is called like a pivot. It makes it just a nice clean corner without having to go off and then starting again. And you're just going to do that around the whole edge, and you'll have to repeat this on every single pocket. It does take some time, but it definitely isn't the longest part. Actually, the pinning was the longest part. So the next step is actually going to be choosing your layout. Now the two that you have for the 24th and the 25th, really it's just deciding which one between those two you want is it each. But the rest of them, you got to lay them out in a way that you like. Now, if you only have a couple fabrics, you might have an actual pattern to it. You could use all one color and then it wouldn't really matter too much. But for me, I have a ton of different fabrics and I want to make sure that they all line up well. I also have 2 different backing colors, so I want to make sure that those line up well as well. But for an easy thing, you're going to have 3 rows of 7. And then you're going to have 2 of your 6.5 by 6.5 squares, and then you're going to have your 2 long ones. So it should be about 4 rows total. That way you can lay them out as you'd want. I think it's easiest to lay them out anyway, even if you have all the same colors, because that will just help you see which ones are row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4. For the sewing purposes, just keeps everything in track and you don't have to worry about counting. When the pile runs out, you're done with that row. Once you've finished laying everything out, you're gonna stack all the rows in their rows. And the first one, you're just gonna go down the row, like so, and put them into row 1. Then you'll do it again for row 2, so that you have all of them stacked together nicely. And that's just going to help you know which ones you're sewing together. And then we're just going to go over and sew all the rows together. Once you have all of those decided, to sew the rows pieces together, you're going to take the one pocket and then you take the second one, flip it over and put the right sides together. The easiest thing is actually to line up them from the bottom. Some of these sometimes get off, and the bottoms are a little bit more important than the top, so you can trim as necessary there. And then here you're going to sew a full 1/4 inch. The other ones you did just shy of a 1/4 inch. So with the full 1/4 inch, you're going to go just to the left of your seam. This will make it so you don't see that other thread through. So you're going to sew there, and you're going to go all the way down and off of the edge. This time you might actually even do a back stitch just so it doesn't come undone. And then from there, that's when you'll start flipping it out, and then you can take the third and attach it to the second and repeat the step. Unfold, do the fourth to the third, and so on and so forth down the whole thing. Now when you get to the longer pieces, don't stress about them. You're just going to be sewing them the exact same way you did the other pockets. They're just going to be a little bit longer, but that's really the only difference it's going to have in the process. Now to sew the rows together, you're going to take the bottom of row 1 and pin it to the top of row 2 with the right sides together. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to have row 1 upside down over top of row 2, so that when you flip it back up, you'll have it so it's facing the right direction and the nice seam on the other side. You're definitely going to want to pin these. You want to make sure that all of these pocket seams are lined up so that they're all together and the pockets line up straight. And it's very important to pin for that to end up working out right. Once you have them all pinned, you're going to sew down that edge at a full 1/4 inch. That way you're hiding that first partial 1/4 inch seam that you did when sewing the bottoms of all the pockets. And you're just going to go down the whole thing. And you're going to do this for every single row until all the rows are attached. So I've now finished sewing all the rows together, and it should look about like this. Next, and the very last step before we attach some other things and can finally put the back and everything together, is we're going to sew on the title piece. So I'm going to go grab that and we'll sew that on together. Sewing on the title piece is super easy. You're just going to take that piece, you're going to line it up to the edge of one, attach it all the way down. I did not pin it this time because there's no seams that I really got to worry about except for making sure that the edge lines up all the way down. And you're just going to sew this with a full 1/4 inch so that everything's all clean and under and equal. And that's really all you got to do to attach the title. So this next step is somewhat optional. Here I created felt numbers so that I could hang them on sort of like ornaments to ribbon that I'm going to sew on to all of the pockets. I will let you know this took me a whole day and a half to make all of these numbers, so if that's not something you're up for, you can also just print out little papers that have numbers on it. You can get iron-on vinyl numbers and you could just iron on some numbers. At this point it's totally optional what you would like to do number wise, but if you would like the same sort of vibe as this, you can try making the felt numbers as well, or you can cut out the pieces of paper with number on it and you can tie them on just like I did with these felt ones to the ribbon. And I'll show you in just a second how I sewed on these ribbons. Because I was not going to do that by hand, so I did do it by machine. Now to sew them on by machine, what I did is I folded the ribbon in half so I could find where the middle was, and then I pinned it on the part where I wanted, and then I just stuck the pocket around this little piece here. You notice that part of my sewing machine did come off so that I could do that, and then I put it in and then just did a little couple stitches forward, back stitch, back forward, so that it was like a knot there, which helped for the ribbon to stay on.
For the last part of this, I have all the bows on. I don't have the numbers on yet because they're going to get in the way of the final part. For the last part, you're going to need a 43 by 4 inch piece. Now this can be the same as your back, it can be different, it doesn't really matter. Mine is the same as my back. And then you'll need a 43 by 33 back piece. So you'll need that, as well as a 32 by 42 piece of backing to go in between this and your backing piece. So for this part, we're actually going to first, before we even sew it to this, is we're going to take these edges and we're going to roll them 1/4 of an inch, then 1/4 of an inch, and then we're going to sew that on both sides, so that way we have a nice closed finished seam for our, this is going to be our rod pocket. Alright, so we'll do that really quick.
For this, you definitely want to go take out some sort of ruler or measuring so that you can get pretty close to a 1/4 of an inch, because you're really going to want to make sure that that lines up well, because this needs to line up exactly with the edges of the whole quilt. So that's what we're going to do, and you'll just sew slightly shy of a 1/4 of an inch when doing this, so that you have it doesn't accidentally go over your 1/4 of an inch seam. Once you've sewn the edges of your rod pocket, you're going to fold it in half so that you have that pocket, and then you're going to take the raw edges and line it up with the top of your quilt, which is going to be along your title panel. And then you're going to sew just shy of 1/2 inch, and you're going to sew that along the edge. I've pinned it to help, since it's folded in half and I wanted to make sure it stayed. But you can definitely just wing this as well. It's not a big deal. If you don't pin, it shouldn't be too hard.
So for the backing, what you're going to do is you're going to take the right side of it and you're going to put it against the right side of this with your pocket folded down in like this. Okay, and you're going to sew it 1/4 of an inch, or even just a little shy of your 1/2 inch here. And that's where you're going to sew. And you're going to have a little bit on both sides of the front piece, because that's what's going to be your binding. So you take it and we're going to sew it all along this seam here, which is the seam we just did for our rod pocket. So that's what we're going to do now, is we're going to sew that so I can show you how it's going to go.
So what you're going to notice here is that I have one seam already because I accidentally sewed a little shy of the 1/2 inch, and you need to go a little over the 1/2 inch. So don't make the same mistake as me, 1/2 inch and then a little bit over the 1/2 inch, so that you're covering that stitch, because otherwise you will see it when you fold it back the right direction.
Okay, so now that we've sewn that, what we can do is flip it over, and you're gonna have this nice clean seam here, and your pocket's gonna be nice and good to go. Now we just need to get the batting in and bind it.
So your batting is going to go between the front and your back piece, and it should line up pretty well. You might have to do a little bit of trimming so that the edges are a little bit more clean, but it should fit pretty well. You will have, as stated, the back should have about 1 inch, maybe a little bit less of 1 inch, depending on how perfect the edges and seams were. so that you can fold it over to create your binding. However, before we can bind, we actually do need to do a little bit of what's kinda quilting. What we're going to be doing is doing a tie form of quilting. So we're going to take some pins and we're going to pin at each of the intersections of the squares, anywhere where the squares meet. Don't worry about the part where the pieces are longer. You're just going to follow all the pockets above that, and that should get it to look the same on the back. But we're going to pin at all of those spots, and then we're going to be stitching with some thicker thread to create our little ties that will hold all of the back and the front together. You can also, if you'd like, if you're a little bit more of a quilter, you can just follow along the seams and do some more fancy quilting. This is just not my forte, so I'm sticking with the tie.
So now that I have it all pinned in the places that I'm going to quilt it on, you're going to need a big, thick, heavy-duty needle with a big eye. And then you're going to need some thin, kind of like embroidery thoughts, but more like this. And you're going to need quite a bit of that. It's okay if you run out. I like to do about 2 arm spans. That's about as much as I can do at a time before it starts getting in the way or annoying. Okay, so now I'm going to thread this through. Come on. Getting it through is always hardest. There we go. Okay, I'm going to give myself a bit. Okay, so normally with this sort of thing you would tie a knot at the end so it doesn't go through. We are not going to do that. You're just going to pay a little bit of attention. I'm going to start at the bottom on this one here. And we're just going to go through.
So to quilt this, you're going to start by going down through the back so that your ties are going to be on the back. And you're going to go up through, and you're going to on one side of that seams where you pinned. And then you're going to come back down through the opposite side of where you came down through so that you're back onto the back. And that's just going to do a quick little stitch there, and then you're going to tie it off. And once you've done that, you can pull the thread over to the next spot that you want, that you're sewing, and then you will go and repeat that process. You'll go down through on one side of the seam and then back up through the other side of the seam. And you'll just go around doing that. You won't cut the strands until you're ready, have gone through all of them and done all the stitches, and then you can cut them and then tie them off. I do about 3 knots. I do 1, 2, so it's a knot, and then 1 more time so it's nice and strong. And then you can trim them down so they're not quite so long.
Okay, now with that done, all that's left is to bind it. Now to bind it, the easiest thing, that little extra that we take, we're going to fold in and then fold 1 more. And you're going to want to pin these all around. If you have these little clips, highly recommend. If you're going to sew or quilt a lot, definitely get them. They're so much better than little pins because you don't stab yourself. Okay. And you're just going to bind all the way around. And we'll get up close so you can see it a little closer as well.
So here it is up close. You're just going to fold it once and then fold it twice, and then you're going to clip. And do the same fold, and clip. And when you get to the corner, it's a little bit of a tricky, not too complicated, but it can see a little bit. So what you're going to do is you're going to corner it, and then you're going to flip, and then flip again. And now you have this really nice point. And you'll just clip it right on that little point so that it stays. And then you'll just continue doing the fold and clip all around the entire thing. All that's left is to sew around. Now here, you're just gonna sew at the very edge. You're just gonna make sure that there's only a little bit on the edge of your binding towards the center of the quilt. That's all you're gonna be doing. There is an exact measurement here because it kind of just depends on how much material you had over the edge, about how thick it's gonna be, but you're just gonna get as close as you can without accidentally getting off of the binding. So it's about 1/4 of an inch, maybe just a little bit shy of 1/4 of an inch from the edge of that binding that you're going to be sewing. And you're just going to do that around the entire thing.